In early 2014, Vladimir Putin made a bold move that would reshape the geopolitical landscape. He claimed that Crimea was inherently Russian, stating it was a part of people's hearts and minds. But was this really the truth, or just a clever narrative spun to justify an aggressive takeover? As tensions in Ukraine escalated, Putin painted a picture of a region under threat, suggesting that Russia was merely stepping in to protect its people from chaos in Kiev and beyond. But let's peel back the layers of this story. Was there a genuine concern for the residents of Crimea, or was it a pretext for a larger agenda? The world watched as Russian forces swiftly moved in, capturing key sites and replacing the local government with a pro-Russian regime. A controversial referendum followed, which many countries deemed illegitimate. Did the people of Crimea truly vote to join Russia, or was their choice coerced under the shadow of military might? Putin's mastery of propaganda has been well documented. He has often manipulated the narrative, twisting facts to fit his ambitions. Just recently, in a meeting with an American leader, he appeared to entertain peace talks, only to reignite devastating strikes against Ukraine. This raises an unsettling question: how much of what Putin says can be trusted? Inside Russia, he wields immense power, crafting narratives that justify his actions without accountability. Now, let's turn our attention to Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. In a recent interview, he shed light on the deeper motives behind Russia's occupation of Crimea. Zelenskyy argues that the annexation was not merely about territorial claims, but a strategic move to encircle Ukraine and prepare for further aggression. If the Ukrainian forces were to withdraw, a dangerous vacuum would be created, enabling Russia to launch an offensive on major cities like Kharkiv and Dnipro. The evidence supports Zelenskyy's claims. Almost immediately after the annexation, Russia militarized Crimea, establishing bases and moving in advanced weaponry. This transformation turned Crimea into a pivotal military hub. Russian aircraft launched attacks from airfields like Sake, while naval forces used the Crimean ports to strike at Ukraine with alarming precision. What does this escalating conflict mean for the future? As the war rages on, Crimea's strategic significance only intensifies. The Kremlin's grip on this territory has not only bolstered its military operations but has also heightened the stakes for Ukraine and its allies. Could this be the key battleground in a broader struggle for territory and identity? As we delve deeper into this conflict, the answers may reveal shocking truths about the lengths nations will go to protect their interests. In a pivotal moment, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, shared his insights during a recent interview with a French publication. He was posed a significant question: could the war reach a conclusion if Ukraine surrendered territories like Crimea? This query isn't new, it surfaces frequently during discussions of peace. Former American President Donald Trump even suggested that Zelenskyy could halt the conflict instantly, under the condition that he relinquished Crimea and renounced any aspirations of joining NATO. As peace talks were proposed, Zelenskyy stood firm, dismissing any thoughts of giving up Ukrainian land. He boldly proclaimed, Russia should not be rewarded for its participation in this war. It is Moscow that must hear the word, stop. His conviction was clear when he asserted, people simply do not grasp Russia's true intentions or capabilities. We are not just battling over land, it transcends territorial disputes. The violation of a nation's integrity signifies much more, a breach of international law and a green light for aggressors. With passion, he reminded those in Europe that these regions are not merely maps, they embody homes, schools, and shared histories. Zelenskyy continued, these places are intertwined with personal legacies. They are where memories live and legacies lie. He emphasized that their value is beyond physical territory, it symbolizes the essence of identity and existence. Then, the interviewer pressed further, how could Zelenskyy make distant nations understand the war's implications for them? This prompted Zelenskyy to unveil a potent truth about Russia's motives for its Crimean invasion. Many suggest peace would follow if Ukrainian troops withdrew from eastern regions. But that is a dangerous illusion. Putin's invasion of Crimea was not a mere territorial grab, it served as a launching point for his ambitions to encircle Ukraine further. He laid out a vivid scenario: if Ukraine were to abandon Donbas, it would unwittingly create an unguarded expanse near Kharkiv, a city of 1.5 million. This would pave the way for Putin to expand his control, snatching industrial hubs like Dnipro. Allowing this would be tantamount to handing him the keys to our future, Zelenskyy declared passionately. The evidence supporting Zelenskyy's belief is stark. Following the annexation, Russia rapidly augmented its military presence in Crimea, establishing bases and deploying advanced weaponry, including the formidable Yak-38 and Yak-141. Signals from those barren lands now resonate through a stark question: how will history judge this moment? The very fate of a nation hangs by a thread as tensions escalate. Previously, we saw how Russia's 43rd Independent Naval Assault Aviation Regiment took control of the Zelenskyy airbase on Crimea's western shore, operating a fleet of Sukhoi Su-24M bombers and Su-30SM fighter jets. When the massive invasion kicked off in 2022, Russia wasted no time putting these assets to work. Imagine standing on the cracked tarmac of Zelenskyy airbase. The sharp scent of jet fuel cuts through the cold air. Engines roar, metal birds ready to unleash destruction. This was no ordinary airport anymore, it had transformed into a nerve center of war. Crimea quickly became Russia's critical hub for launching strikes deep into Ukraine. Airfields like Zelenskyy and Belbek turned into relentless launchpads for Russian warplanes dropping bombs and firing missiles at Ukrainian cities, towns, and front lines. The hum of drones filled the skies, their silent wings casting shadows over southern and central Ukraine. The Kremlin even converted a civilian airport into a secretive drone base, camouflaged with tents and hidden storage, preparing an invisible arsenal of unmanned aerial vehicles for deadly missions. But Crimea's role did not stop in the air. From the port city of Sevastopol, Russia's Black Sea Fleet launched Kalibr-class cruise missiles, raining destruction while maintaining naval blockades around strategic locations like Odessa. The sound of missiles slicing through the sky echoed ominously across the sea. Crimea became a fortress, a launching pad for relentless pressure on Ukraine's southern defenses. The Kerch Strait Bridge, a vital artery connecting Crimea to mainland Russia, allowed rapid movement of troops, weapons, and supplies. Imagine the constant flow of heavy trucks rumbling across the bridge, carrying everything needed to fuel the war machine day and night, relentless and unstoppable. Russia's commanders didn't just stop at using Crimea as a base. They deployed their most advanced military technology, their S-500 air defense systems with their imposing radar arrays, watching the skies like silent sentinels. These high-tech shields guarded the peninsula, securing Russia's grip on the region. Without control of Crimea, Moscow would have faced an entirely different battle. Its ability to dominate the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov would have been severely limited. The endless missile strikes on southern Ukrainian cities, especially in Zaporizhia, would have been far harder to execute. The flow of resources and reinforcements through the Kerch Strait Bridge gave Russia a strategic lifeline. Could Ukraine have held their ground if Crimea was lost? Would the tides of war have shifted dramatically? The answer lies buried in the strategic value of this peninsula. More than just land, it is the key to Ukraine's southern front and Russia's offensive reach. The shadows cast by Crimea's control stretch far beyond the peninsula itself, shaping the course of a brutal conflict that rages on. Did you ever wonder if a land grab might be just the opening move in a much larger, hidden scheme? When Russia seized control of Crimea in 2014, many believed it was a quick power play, but what if it was the first domino in a long-calculated plan to dominate a huge chunk of Ukraine and beyond? Let's rewind a bit. After Russia's forces took Crimea, they gained a crucial foothold. Losing control of the Kerch Strait Bridge, the vital link between Crimea and mainland Russia, or failing to station troops there would have drastically limited Russia's southern offensive capabilities. Without Crimea, any attack into Ukraine's southern regions, such as Kherson and Zaporizhia, would have faced massive logistical challenges. The Kremlin would be confined mostly to pushing from the east, overland through Luhansk and Donetsk, a much narrower front. But instead, Crimea gave Russia a powerful springboard. Today, Russia controls nearly 75% of Kherson and Zaporizhia and dominates almost all of Luhansk and Donetsk. Altogether, this amounts to roughly 20% of Ukrainian land. Could all this control be an accident? Hardly. While no one can say for sure if Vladimir Putin dreamed this all up years ago, whispers and leaks suggest he planned far beyond just Crimea. For years, analysts have suspected Putin aims to expand Russia's borders, potentially reclaiming former Soviet republics and restoring influence lost after the Cold War. Yet launching invasions over such vast territories is no spur-of-the-moment decision. This kind of conquest requires painstaking strategy and patience. It looks like Putin played the waiting game perfectly, striking when Ukraine was most vulnerable during its 2014 civil upheaval, snatching Crimea and igniting separatist fires in Donbass. That was no random move, it was creating a fortress to launch deeper incursions later. Behind the scenes, Russia quietly fortified Crimea over those years, stacking troops and military hardware while the world's gaze shifted elsewhere. Slowly but relentlessly, they built the chessboard for the massive invasion launched in 2022, catching many off guard but confirming critics' suspicions about the long-term intent. One insider with a fascinating perspective is Gleb Pavlovsky, once a close Kremlin advisor who later turned critic. He revealed how meticulous the Crimea takeover really was. This wasn't a haphazard assault. Deploying special forces to foreign soil, and then holding it with such precision, meant this operation was orchestrated at the highest planning levels. The tools, the timing, the political chaos all aligned perfectly to seize control and use Crimea as a propellant into Ukraine's heartland. So, if Crimea was just the starting point, what was next? And how deep did this plan run? Was there a moment when Putin saw the full picture, when the pieces fell into place and the grand strategy unfolded in real time? The answers are not just buried in military maps and troop movements. They live in the tense whispers between world leaders, in the silent calculations behind closed doors, and in Ukraine's fierce resistance today. How could a peninsula surrounded by waves and wind become the linchpin of a battle that writes the future of an entire continent? The answer hides in shadows, waiting to be unveiled. But if Crimea is the key, what doors did it unlock for Russia, and what price does the world pay for such ambition? The story is far from over. And the next revelation might just change everything we thought we knew. Before, we explored how the swift, covert invasion of Crimea in 2014 was not a rash move but a masterstroke carefully engineered and patiently prepared. Now, let's dive deeper into the shadows behind that gripping takeover, a plan so calculated it reshaped the map and rattled the world. What if Crimea was just the first domino, in a much larger, far more dangerous game? Gleb Pavlovsky, once a close confidant of the Kremlin, turned critic, revealed a chilling insight. He said the Crimean operation was no spontaneous act. It was a meticulously crafted blueprint, filed away for years within Russia's military intelligence, waiting for the perfect moment to leap into action. Could such precision have been possible without deep-rooted intent? Another skeptic inside Russia, Gennady Gudkov, added fuel to the theory. He claimed Vladimir Putin harbored a grand vision far beyond Crimea, a drive to reclaim what he called Russia's lost lands. This wasn't just politics. It was history rewritten in blood and strategy. Putin himself hinted at these ambitions, referring to eastern Ukrainian regions like Donetsk, Luhansk, Kharkiv, and Odessa as parts of New Russia. He questioned why these lands ended up inside Ukraine at all, tracing changes back to nearly a century ago, as if justifying a historical deed overdue for correction. Leaked documents, reportedly sourced from inside Russia's corridors of power, surfaced around the time Crimea was annexed. They depicted a Kremlin leadership already plotting to absorb more than just the peninsula, aiming for eastern and southern Ukraine too. It's a staggering revelation. Crimea wasn't an isolated move but the opening gambit in a vast campaign to redraw borders by force. This chilling puzzle aligns perfectly with President Volodymyr Zelensky's warnings. He insists the 2014 seizure was designed as a stepping stone to build a strategic springboard. With Crimea under full control, Russia could position itself for later, more extensive incursions. The military buildup, the deployment of new air defense systems, naval bases, and drone operations all confirm this wasn't just a defensive action. It was a relentless push to dominate the region. But here's the uncomfortable truth: what if this aggressive expansion is just the beginning? Zelenskyy fearfully speculates that this could be one piece in a frightening blueprint that could eventually encompass a direct challenge not only to Ukraine but to Europe's stability, NATO itself. With every move Russia makes, this threat intensifies. As Europe debates responses and hesitates, Kremlin's ambitions might grow bolder, waiting only to exploit any sign of weakness. Could Europe's resolve be the only barrier standing between peace and chaos? And if that line falters, what will be left of the world order? The silent storm is gathering. The stakes have never been higher. What lurks behind the curtain of Putin's carefully staged annexation could redefine the future, not just for Ukraine, but for all of us. Imagine a world where the line between safety and devastation is measured not by borders, but by the reach of missiles. What if a war fought thousands of miles away today could, tomorrow, strike the heart of Europe itself? This chilling reality is no longer science fiction, it's the stark warning from Ukraine's leader, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who sees the conflict not just as a fight for his country's survival, but as a battle for the entire continent's future. In the previous part, we explored how Zelenskyy uncovered Russia's true intentions behind seizing Crimea in 2014, using the peninsula as a launchpad for further aggression and to encircle Ukraine's south. Now, the story deepens. Zelenskyy reveals a terrifying vision: Putin's ambitions stretch far beyond Ukraine's borders. If Ukraine falls, Europe itself could face the full fury of Russian power. Zelenskyy warns that Putin's strategy depends on Europe's strength. If Europe stands firm, Moscow's expansion may be halted. But if Europe falters, the war machine will push relentlessly westward. The distance between Moscow and Paris is less than 3,000 kilometers. Yet today's Russian missiles already reach 2,500 kilometers. Ukraine also possesses missiles with a 3,000-kilometer range. The pace of military technology is accelerating on both sides, driven by this brutal conflict. In just 2 years, both Russia and Europe could field weapons capable of striking targets 5,000 kilometers away. The ocean no longer offers protection. The seas and oceans that once formed natural barriers are now irrelevant. The threat of war is global and immediate. Zelenskyy emphasizes that Ukraine is currently bearing the brunt of this war, but if Kiev falls, the front lines will shift dramatically. The Baltic states, Poland, and even Germany could soon find themselves in the crosshairs of this expanding conflict. He challenges the common notion that Ukraine sits on Europe's eastern edge, insisting instead that it lies at the continent's very heart. The fate of Ukraine will decide where Europe's eastern border truly lies. If Ukraine cannot hold, that border could move to Poland or even Germany. This stark reality fuels Ukraine's urgent calls for sustained international support. Zelenskyy insists that allies must maintain pressure on Russia through stringent sanctions designed to cripple its economy and constrain Putin's war ambitions. Without this support, the consequences could ripple across the entire European continent. Can Europe muster the resolve to stand firm? Or will the shadow of war creep further west, threatening millions more? The answer to that question could shape the future of an entire continent. The stakes have never been higher, and the clock is ticking. Before we dive into what's next, here's a quick recap. Ukraine has been pleading with Western allies to keep the pressure on Russia. Sanctions must keep squeezing the Russian economy, making it impossible for Putin to carry on his relentless campaign. Yet, Russia's leaders remain defiant, demanding recognition of their claimed territories and vowing to fight until victory or ruin. Now, imagine a cold, gray morning in Moscow. The air carries a sharp metallic scent, mixed with the distant rumble of military vehicles. Inside a grand hall in Beijing, a parade unfolds under the watchful eyes of three powerful leaders. Vladimir Putin stands tall, eyes steely, voice booming with certainty. He boasts that Russian forces are advancing on every front, squeezing Ukraine tighter with every passing day. But behind the bravado, is it desperation? Or absolute confidence? Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, recently stunned the international stage by calling for global acceptance of territories like Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea as Russian soil. His words cut through diplomatic channels like a knife. Peace can only come if the world accepts these new realities. A bold statement, one that challenges the very foundations of international law and sovereignty. Meanwhile, Ukraine's foreign minister Andriy Sybiha delivers a stark warning: Russia hasn't softened its aims. Instead, it's time to strike back harder with tougher sanctions, ones that will cripple Moscow's war machine and force it to reconsider its reckless aggression. But will the world listen? Can sanctions alone break the grip of a leader so willing to gamble everything? Putin's recent remarks at the Beijing military parade reveal an unyielding stance. He makes it clear, without a peace deal, Russia will solve its objectives on the battlefield. No compromises, no retreats. The war will drag on, regardless of the mounting losses. Over 1 million Russian casualties. Tens of thousands of tanks, vehicles, and equipment destroyed. A battered economy, growing unrest at home. Yet, Putin presses forward, consuming more lives and resources like an insatiable storm. What drives such relentless determination? Is it a quest for glory, survival, or something darker? Behind closed doors, is the Russian leader calculating the cost or blinded by obsession? Meanwhile, Ukraine refuses to yield. Its soldiers brace against the endless waves of assault. They intercept drones and missiles midair, launch daring counterattacks, and cling to every inch of their land with fierce resolve. The question lingers: how much longer can this brutal stalemate last? Can the world find a way to break this cycle before more lives are lost? Or is this just the calm before an even greater storm? The fate of a nation, and perhaps the future of an entire region, hangs in the balance. In the relentless battle for autonomy and survival, Ukraine stands firm against the aggressive tide of invasion. As Russian assaults rain down, Ukrainian forces are not just holding their ground, they are countering with audacity. Yearning for their lost territories, especially Crimea, they have struck decisively, crippling Russian military operations and striking fear into the hearts of their aggressors. Yet, the heart of Ukraine, its President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, remains unwavering. He firmly rejects any notion of surrendering Ukrainian soil, asserting that territory is more than land, its history, identity, and home. But what if the quest for peace requires dangerous compromises? This dilemma looms, with voices in the West suggesting that concessions might lead to a ceasefire. However, Zelenskyy's stance pitches Ukraine into a deeper quagmire. Without the promise of peace through yield, both nations may find themselves ensnared in a prolonged stalemate, where hope for resolution fades with each passing day. And as pressure mounts, some in Ukraine are urging their allies to step up sanctions against Russia, calling for punitive measures to disrupt the Kremlin's war machine. But will that be enough? Could intensifying sanctions actually force a change, or are we on the brink of an even greater tragedy, where loss begets loss, and the battlefield sprawls endlessly? As we peer into the fog of war, the echoes of conflict cast a shadow over the future. With Ukraine standing resolutely against the tide, the world watches, uncertain of what comes next. Will this stalemate persist? Or will swift and decisive action change the course of history for both nations? A reckoning looms, a question of survival, identity, and the intricate web of international politics. What unfolds next may determine not just the fate of one nation, but the balance of power in the region for decades to come. The Kremlin's intent, he explained, was to turn Crimea into a launching pad for future offensives, a sinister strategy designed to encircle and destabilize Ukraine. If the Eastern Front were abandoned, cities like Kharkiv would lie vulnerable, leaving space wide open for aggression. The evidence supporting this theory is hard to ignore. Following the annexation in 2014, Russia quickly fortified Crimea, establishing bases and deploying military assets. For instance, in 2014, a series of events unfolded that would reshape the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe for years to come. Did you know that just a few months following the Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity, Russia, under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, forcibly annexed Crimea? This bold move was cloaked in claims of historical rights and notions of protection, but what lay beneath the surface was far more complex, a web of strategic calculations and hidden intentions. The takeover was swift and calculated. Special forces were deployed to seize critical locations across Crimea, including its parliament building. The existing government faced immediate displacement, paving the way for a pro-Russian regime. Soon after, a highly contentious referendum was held, where Russian authorities claimed that residents overwhelmingly voted to align with Russia. However, many in the international community dismissed this assertion, labeling the referendum a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty. Despite this, Russia proceeded to fortify its presence in Crimea, transforming the peninsula into a military stronghold. Amidst the chaos, Putin delivered a lengthy speech justifying his actions. He painted Crimea as an inseparable part of Russia, echoing sentiments that had been passed through generations. But was this truly about protecting Russian citizens? Or was it a strategic maneuver to distract from Russia's domestic turmoil, rampant corruption, economic instability, and discontent? The debate surrounding Putin's intentions continues to spark controversy. Fast forward to today, and the message from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy shines a brighter light on these motivations. He has laid out a compelling theory of why Crimea was so critical to Russia's ambitions. Zelenskyy asserts that the occupation was not merely about claiming land, but rather a calculated strategic play to encircle Ukraine and prepare for further aggression. He warns that ceding any territory would only embolden Russia and compromise Ukraine's future. As the war rages on, it becomes increasingly clear that Crimea serves not just as a geographical piece of land, but as a pivot of military operations and aggression toward Ukraine. It's a base for mounting attacks, deploying naval forces, and launching missiles. If Russia did not control Crimea, its capabilities in this conflict would be dramatically diminished. Zelensky's insights reveal the deep emotional and historical ties to the territories being fought over. This is not just a territorial dispute, it's about the identity and legacy of a nation. As the battle continues, the stakes rise higher. What will happen next in this tragic chess game of power and sovereignty? Will the truths behind Crimea's annexation ultimately be overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of dominance, or can the spirit of Ukraine prevail against all odds? What if the fate of an entire nation hinged on a single, secretive maneuver? In 2014, the world watched as Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, orchestrated an unexpected and unlawful takeover of the Crimean Peninsula. This bold move has sparked countless debates among analysts and experts, each trying to uncover the true motives behind this audacious act. Was it merely a display of power? Or was it the beginning of a grander scheme to reclaim lands that he believed were rightfully his? As the dust settled, it became evident that this maneuver was not just about territory. In the aftermath of Ukraine's revolution of dignity, which left the nation in turmoil and its former president, Viktor Yanukovych, ousted, Russia seized its opportunity. Special forces were deployed to Crimea, swiftly capturing key locations, including the local parliament. What followed was a controversial referendum, deemed illegitimate by many nations, which claimed that the Crimean populace overwhelmingly wished to join Russia. But was this really a reflection of the people's desires? Or was it a cleverly staged performance by the Kremlin to legitimize an illegal occupation? The international community largely condemned the referendum, viewing it as a blatant violation of Ukraine's sovereignty. Yet, Russia's grip on Crimea tightened, and the peninsula became a strategic military stronghold. Putin, in a lengthy address, claimed that Crimea had always belonged to Russia, asserting that it was an inseparable part of the nation in people's hearts and minds. This narrative, however, is challenged by the realities on the ground. Fast forward to today, and Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, is shedding light on the true motivations behind this takeover. In a recent interview, he articulated a chilling theory: the annexation was a calculated move to encircle Ukraine and prepare for further aggression. The stakes have never been higher, as he emphasized the emotional weight of the land, homes, history, and identity, all at risk of being erased by an aggressor. Imagine the echoes of history, the cries of families, and the lingering scent of conflict that permeates the air. Zelenskyy's message is clear: ceding any territory is not merely a political compromise, it is a surrender of identity, legacy, and the very essence of what it means to be Ukrainian. As we delve deeper into this conflict, we must ask ourselves, what will it take to reclaim not just land, but a nation's pride? Will the world stand by as history repeats itself? The ramifications of this conflict stretch far beyond national borders. They touch every individual who values sovereignty and the right to self-determination. The question looms large: can Ukraine withstand the storm, or will the shadows of aggression swallow it whole? The answer may lie in the unity of its people and the resolve of its leaders. Each moment is a step closer to either freedom or despair, and the world is watching closely. Previously, we explored how the fight over Ukrainian lands isn't just about geography. These places hold memories, homes, and legacies, schools where children learn, fields where ancestors rest, stories captured in history books and art. The invasion was never merely a territorial dispute, it was a ruthless attempt to erase identity itself. With this in mind, the question remains: why did Russia choose Crimea as the starting point for this campaign? Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Ukraine's president, laid bare the harsh truth during an interview. Some believe peace could come if Ukraine just withdrew troops from the east. Zelenskyy shatters that illusion. Russia's occupation of Crimea was no random ploy, it was a calculated move to claim a strategic foothold, a launchpad for even greater territorial ambitions. Crimea became the linchpin for encircling Ukraine's south, a base from which subsequent offensives could roll out. In 2014, after swiftly taking Crimea, Russia began creeping into eastern Ukraine, eyeing regions like Donbass. Zelenskyy warns, abandoning these areas would leave cities like Kharkiv, with over 1 million residents, dangerously exposed. The industrial heart of Dnipro would be next. The stakes couldn't be clearer. What cements this fear? Russia's rapid militarization of Crimea. Almost immediately after annexation, Russia transformed the peninsula into a fortress. The 43rd Independent Naval Assault Aviation Regiment claimed Sake Air Base, deploying squadrons of Sukhoi Su-24M bombers and Su-30SM fighters. The hum of jets, the scent of aviation fuel, and the constant drill of soldiers embedded Crimea as a formidable stronghold. When the full-scale conflict erupted in 2022, these assets became instruments of war against Ukraine's cities and front lines. But could this military buildup be just one piece of a bigger puzzle? While many saw Crimea as a mere territorial prize, Zelenskyy's insight reveals a chilling strategy, a well-orchestrated siege with Crimea as its core. This stronghold enabled Russia to launch missiles, drones, and blockades that tightened the noose around Ukraine. Could it be that Crimea is more than just land? Could it be the key to understanding Russia's relentless pursuit of control? As the noise of jets rumbles overhead and the shadows of conflict deepen, the world watches. What will Russia's next move be? Will the fortified peninsula continue to fuel aggression, or will the spirit of Ukraine prevail against this calculated siege? The truth behind Crimea's seizure may hold the answer, and it's a revelation that reshapes everything we thought we knew.